You're listening to Wildlife Control Consultant, where we provide research-based information on all things related to vertebrate pest management. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast. Hey, glad to have you on board. I hope your week has gone well. I have just finished some traveling recently where I was asked to speak at a convention. Very grateful for that opportunity where I was able to talk about a rather technical topic regarding rodenticides and the active ingredients. And so they asked for the topic. It's certainly not the most crowd-pleasing topic, to be sure, because you're not learning how to directly control stuff, but you're really taking a deeper dive into some of the modes of action and LD50 and some of the complexities involved with rodenticides. And so I got to commend them. They hung in there with me for some pretty heavy material. It was gratifying to see how many people were taking pictures of some of my slides for some of the information handled there, because the fact of the matter is rodenticides are under greater and greater scrutiny, sometimes fairly, sometimes I think not so fairly, but nevertheless, change is a-comin', as they might say. But nevertheless, I was really grateful to have them there. And of course, if you're looking to have me speak, you can have me speak remotely or in person. You can reach out to me, of course, at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Be happy to discuss what I can do for you and your audience. So be happy to do that, whether for your personal company or for your association. We'd love to hear from you. Well, I have, now that I'm back, we have a ton of snow here in central Montana. That's not all. You say, well, what else would you expect? Well, that's not always the case here in Montana. Sometimes we go into stages of drought. Of course, the western end of our state suffered some severe drought last year where the snowpack was dismal. And we rely deeply on our snowpack to provide water. Of course, the Missouri River also needs that water as well. And we, of course, ship that water down to those of you in the other states in the central part of our country, to be sure, as it gets down ultimately to the Mississippi River. Nevertheless, we have got some so I thought we would talk a little bit about safety. Again, not the most exciting topic for people within the business, but nevertheless, those of you in snow areas, and of course some of you down in the Florida area, got some snow that you weren't anticipating a few weeks ago. Nevertheless, it's important to talk about some ice and safety. But let me just start off with a statistic here. This is from OSHA. Let me kind of blow it up a little bit for you here so those of you can read it a little bit better. Notice what it says here. According to OSHA, slips, trips, and falls cause nearly 700 workplace fatalities a year, which is ultimately about 15% of all workplace deaths. Now, we need to make sure we tease that out a little bit. A slip is when you lose appropriate friction contact with a surface. A trip is when you encounter an obstruction that causes you to fall. And then, of course, a fall is where you're going from, a vertical position to something else. And, of course, you have falls to surface level, then you have falls for distance. So we're just going to focus today not so much on trips as it is in terms of slips, because when we're dealing with icy conditions, snowy conditions, wet conditions, you run the risk of having some slip hazards. And, if you get injured, you're going to be out of work for a while. And unless you have appropriate insurance, you're not going to get financial help for that. And so I had a colleague who suffered a serious fall off of a ladder. The ladder kicked out on him, and he only dropped no more than 10 feet. But the fall was devastating for him. Thankfully, it was just injuring his arm, but the arm was, of course, he lost the ability to throw a ladder around, and that was a significant part of his business, and it essentially bankrupted him. So he was out of business so long, and it was a really terrible thing. And not just talking about the physical injury. So this is serious. That if you have a slip injury, you could become injured, and so even if you're not off of work per se, your quality of life can be significantly reduced. So I wanted to talk a little about the importance of being careful on surfaces in slip averages. So what are some of the things that you can do? Well, let me kind of put in a little keyword here in the internet, and it's called the penguin walk. All right, and so the penguin walk is basically to walk safely. Let me kind of put in and what the penguin walk is all about, as I try to find the here we go. This will work. What the idea being is that when you're walking on slippery surfaces, you need to be leaning forward, because the danger for you is to fall with your feet kicking out, so that you're walking along and then your feet kick out and then you crash. Well, if you fall, you want to be sure you're going forward, because then you at least have the ability to break your fall. But the real risks are for you to have your feet kick out. Well, one of the ways to prevent that is to not lean back, but to lean forward, which is what that penguin walk is all about, so that you're walking more on the balls of your feet rather than on the heels. Where normally when we walk, it's, to push off with our toe and then we hit with our heel. Well, that's the slip hazard that would come in. When we're on slippery surfaces, we really want to we kind of want to do a little bit of the shuffle, where you're not striding, you're not having your walk stride going as far, and you want to be leaning forward in what's called this penguin walk. So you're having your knees bent, leaning forward and walking. So you want to be deliberate. And of course, you're under tremendous time pressure. One of the biggest challenges in the vertebrate pest world is that we are time constrained, right? So this is one of the differences with us and the traditional pest control world. The pest control world can be a lot more efficient because the pesticide does so much of the work. But in our world, it requires us to be handling often traps, doing physical manipulation, because we just don't have the pesticides to control a lot of the vertebrate animals that we're dealing with. And so time is really critical. So it's important when you're walking that you want to be sure that you are taking the time, because if you don't have the time to recover, you might as well take the time to make sure you don't get injured in the first place. So to repeat, you want to be sure when you're walking, you're leaning forward slightly. You want to be on the balls of your feet, and you want to shuffle more than the full stride walk. I'm a fast walker, so this is something I have to deliberately do to slow down when I'm walking. I go over for coffee to a coffee break at an area building near where I work, and there's a lot of ice and snow at times, and so I really have to kind of shuffle along and then look like an old man. But it certainly beats having my feet kick out and I'm taking the header in the back of my head, where I slip and fall, or I hit my tailbone and really do some serious injury to yourself. So that's the penguin walk. Of course, making sure you're wearing good shoes. But when you're dealing with ice, unless you've got cleats, probably not going to help that much, right? So you want to be sure you're walking carefully. All right, so that's number one. Walk carefully. Use the penguin walk. Keep your eyes on where you're walking and walk deliberately. Number two, you need to be paying attention to when you're getting in and out of your vehicle. This is an area where people can really, they try to rush out quickly, and you can step and then slip. And now all of a sudden, maybe the back of your head's hitting your truck, hitting the edge of your door. And so you want to be sure that you're purposeful and deliberate in all of your motions here, so that when you're getting out of the vehicle, you plant your foot, shift, hold on to the steering wheel, making sure you're stable before you begin to move, because you don't know all the time whether there's going to be ice and snow conditions. It may look snowy. You may think, oh, I'm going to get some grip there, and all of a sudden it's not. You're going to be stepping on snow-covered ice, and then bang, you can go out. I had a friend of mine, his wife was stepping out of a vehicle, and she broke her tib-fib, which is the tibia and fibia. Those are the two bones in your lower leg above your ankle, just below your knee. Those two bones there, the fibula and tibia. Tibia is your shin bone. The fibula is the bone that's behind it. Okay, so that's the tib-fib fracture. She broke both of them with a slip out of her vehicle. So, wow, that is, and she was laid up for a while, and that was a significant problem. Okay, so can that happen to you? Absolutely, that can happen to you. So you want to be sure you're very careful coming in and out of your vehicle. That's number 2. Number 3, stairs. Stairs and anything that's inclined, right? So if you're walking down a sidewalk, are you walking downhill? That's going to be even more important for you to slow things down. Being careful about how much you're carrying in your hands. Now, that's going to be hard in our business, right? You may be carrying traps. You may be carrying other equipment. You may be carrying paperwork. Maybe carrying a ladder. It's going to be important for you to be very deliberate about your movements here. But when you're going downstairs, you've got to hang on to a railing of some sort, or be very systematic, step down that stairs. Again, it can be driving you nuts in terms of how slow everything can be, but you don't want to get a serious injury from a slip hazard. Okay? All right, that is going to be it for the slip hazards. It's wintertime. Even those of you in our southern states that don't get a lot of ice and snow, water can sometimes be an area where you have some slip falls as well. You may have some loose soil. There are other ways to get injured. So some of these principles, you got to keep your wits about you, because your body is your income. If your body gets damaged, you are going to be significantly reduced in the level of financial productivity that you're going to have. So be careful out there, right? Not every hazard is from a roof, right? So sometimes you can get injured severely just walking on terra firma, because sometimes it's a lot slipperier than it actually looks. I'll get that out eventually. All right. So what's the second topic that I wanted to discuss today? And that's where we're getting into fire hazards. So let me pull over the publication here. This is a document that was sent out from an organization I am with. And basically, it talked about the importance of being fire safe. Now, you may recall that October is Fire Safety Month, right? Obviously, I'm not talking in October here. I'm speaking right now in February. But nevertheless, this may be a slightly slower time for you in your business at this time of year. But you know things are going to kick in full fury here pretty soon. Now is the time to sort of be thinking about, is there fire hazards perhaps in your garage? Is there fire hazards in the shop that you're working in? Because you want to be thinking about what happens if something goes wrong, right? So what are some of the things that you can do to help reduce fire risk on your property? Number 1, you want to make sure you eliminate clutter, right? So the less debris that's around, the less likely that something's going to go awry. It also allows emergency equipment to come into the facility. That's number 1. Number 2, if you smoke or you have employees that smoke, make sure you're careful about where that smoking takes place. Now, typically speaking, in the wildlife control field, we don't really have a lot of chemical involvement, but you may be dealing with things where there may be some gasoline type equipment. There could be oils. Perhaps you're repairing vehicles utensils inside of your garage. Perhaps you have acetylene torches, that sort of thing, for welding purposes. Then maybe you do some woodwork when you're building some equipment for some like trap boxes and things of this nature. You may have some things that are highly flammable, and you want to be careful about cigarettes. One of the things that's a significant cause of fires, right? And that is, people put a cigarette down and all of a sudden it's lighting something that they didn't anticipate to occur. Same way with people that like to light candles, right? Candles are a significant source of fire starting, right? So be careful with your smoking utensils, and just kind of be purposeful, making sure that people know where they need to put their cigarettes out. Have designated smoking containers for people to put their smoking cigarettes out, because don't just flick them in the trash can. There could be papers in there, and all of a sudden you may have something smoldering, and poof, you have a fire that takes place. Check your fire extinguishers, right? Fire extinguishers really aren't that expensive, and you will be amazed at how much easier it is to put a fire out when it's small than when it starts getting fully engulfed, right? And so some of you may know that I'm a part-paid engineer at a fire department, and I have so much more to learn about fire. I'm not a firefighter. I'm not the guys that go into the buildings that do the real firefighting work, right? So I'm in a support capacity. But as I learn more about fire, our houses and the materials that we have in our society make fires burn incredibly hot and incredibly toxic, right? So because we have so many different chemicals involved here, it's not like the old wood buildings back in the 1800s. Now we have plastics and paper and stuff. If you just think about how much stuff you have in your house or your garage, think about what happens when that starts to ignite and starts to throw off energy. Now it's heating other items, which then begin gassing off, and then those gases begin to burn, right? So if you can get those fires put out quickly, wow, it is amazing how much that really solves. Because no matter how fast your fire department is, it's still going to take them a couple of minutes to get to your particular building, and you will be shocked at how fast a fire can go full on and really destroy a lot of stuff, particularly if you have things like gasoline, some flammable chemicals inside. You have paints, perhaps, spray paint containers. There can be some significant ignition factors within that particular work area. So chemical safety, of course, again, we don't have a lot of chemicals in the vertebrate pest field, but some of you are doing pest control as well. Are you keeping those pesticides in a safe area, right? Do you have a special storage materials? It probably is going to be advisable for some of you to be looking at getting what they call fire cabinets, right? Where you're putting flammable items like gasoline containers. I don't see any reason why pesticides couldn't be put in this, provided they're not like airtight. I would guess some things you might want to have. If they're going to be gassing off, you want to be sure that's going to be gassing off to the exterior of the building. But you need to be sure there's appropriate ventilation depending on the products that you're using. But you want to be sure that if there is a fire, that all of a sudden is not going to just be burning out, right? So a fire cabinet for some of your gasoline and flammable products could be very important. Making sure you're keeping trash cleaned up and that you're not storing, oils and oily rags and they're piling up. So making sure that you're keeping things as organized and uncluttered as possible. Do you have a lot of cardboard boxes around, for example, that maybe you don't need? Maybe you need to kind of just have a cleaning day and just remove a lot of that extra debris and are things properly shelved? Okay. And then are your exits clear? If there is a fire, now a lot of you are going to be working in areas where people aren't going to be sleeping per se. So, people would be able to get out, but it's always a good, but if you're working out of your home and out of your own home garage, is there are the exits to that particular building, are they clear? So in case there is a fire in one part of your structure, you have alternative exits to leave. Those are key elements. And it's amazing that, just a few simple strategies can go a long way to make what could have been a real full-on disaster to just being a nuisance and a problem. Do you have smoke detectors inside of your working area? Now, obviously, if you're smoking or if you're doing smoky type work out in that particular area, that can be a problem. But sometimes strategic placement of smoke detectors can minimize those particular risks. If you make sure you're not smoking near your smoke detector, or perhaps having appropriate ventilation, sometimes moving a smoke detector farther down a wall if you're doing a lot of work, that can be helpful, particularly if your garage is against your building. But also making sure that you have smoke detectors, inside the living space where you reside, making sure those work. Are you testing them properly? And then also ask yourself the question, is it worth getting a little annoyance with, maybe a smoke detector that goes off a little bit too often, to just simply say, something got a little smoky here, but I'm hearing it go off. But nevertheless, better to have that annoyance for a few minutes than to have it positioned in a place where the whole building is going to be engulfed before it begins to smoke, right? So we don't want to over rely on smoke detectors. Smoke detectors are important, but sometimes there's a delay factor with those as well, particularly if they're not positioned at the spot where the smoke would concentrate very, very quickly. So some things to keep in mind there. But doing something, whether you're walking on ice or whether you're trying to minimize fire hazards on your property, that can go a long way in making sure your business stays viable for the future, because these little disasters, whether you get personally injured or whether you suffer a fire, they can be devastating to the profitability of your business as well as your own mental health, right? So now you're staggering with you have enough stress and things running a business without having to worry about, am I getting injured? Am I suffering, having to run a business while I'm being injured, or has my business suffered a catastrophic fire? Think about those two things here, and again, sometimes the best way to make money is to avoid losing money. Safety is so critically important, even though it's not one of the sexy topics like how to control coyotes or something. I hope you found this information valuable for you. I do think we need to be working hard on these topics and not ignoring them, because it's important for us in the wildlife control field. That's not just about, our businesses are not just about catching animals and removing wildlife problems. We also need to be thinking about other things to make sure our business remains viable and that we're in healthy enough condition to continue doing that work. Well, I'm Stephen Vantassel. You've been listening to the Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast, where we discuss all things related to the control of vertebrate pests from a technical and research-based foundation. Hope you found this helpful. Do put some of these principles to practice. Do want to ask you, if you could, to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you can be notified. I tend to publish about once a week. If you have questions, comments, yes, even criticisms, you can reach out to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. If you have a topic that you would like to have covered, love to hear from that. If you have, perhaps you're selling a product, perhaps something is on your heart and you want to be on the show, we love having guests on our show. You'll find us to be great hosts, and we'd love to sort of spotlight either material that you have come forward. Definitely reach out to me again at Wildlife Control Consultant, and we'll make arrangements to see what we can do here to have you on the show. All right, well, that's it for this week. Be safe out there. Get yourself ready for this coming year. Look at that fire safety. Look at your slip and fall hazard safety, and let's have a great year together. Take care, everyone. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Vertebrate pest control is an inherently dangerous activity involving risk of bodily injury to you, others, and or property. Vertebrate pest control also involves legal issues, so be sure to always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and/or other control methods when controlling pests. Wildlife Control Consultant LLC, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their affiliates are not responsible for your use of the information provided here. Always consult a qualified and appropriate professional before employing the information provided here.